Welcome to today's Explainer. I am so excited you're joining me for this one. We're about to embark on this really fascinating journey together to uncover the hidden science of high sensitivity. Listen, if you have ever felt completely overwhelmed by the emotions of the world around you, you are absolutely in the right place. Let's dive into what's actually happening in your brain and, more importantly, figure out how to turn that pure exhaustion into a real source of strength.
So let me ask you something. Do you feel other people's pain as if it were literally your own? Seriously, think about it for a second. Do you constantly absorb the stress of a crowded room? Or maybe, you find yourself completely exhausted, like literally needing to take a nap after a totally normal venting session with a friend. Well, good news. It's not a character flaw, and it is definitely not all in your head.
Here is our roadmap for today. We're going to kick things off with the science of the empath, move into the cost of caring, and then talk about redefining your boundaries. After that, we'll look at empathy versus compassion, unlock the power of self-compassion, and wrap it all up with protecting your energy. All right, let's jump right in. Part 1. The science of the empath. Wired to feel. We really need to look at the neurology behind why highly sensitive people feel things so incredibly deeply. To lay down our scientific foundation, it's important to know that researchers have pinpointed two very distinct types of empathy. First up, there's cognitive empathy. This is your ability to understand and intellectually grasp someone else's perspective, right? It's simply knowing that someone is sad. But then you have emotional empathy, and this is the capacity to share and vicariously experience the emotions of others. For empaths, this isn't just some mental exercise. It is a full-on physical, bodily experience of another person's emotions. And here is where it gets super fascinating. This actually maps out physically in the brain. Brain scan studies show a literal difference in gray matter depending on how you process empathy. People with high cognitive empathy, they have increased gray matter in the mid-cingulate cortex, which is an area mostly associated with decision-making. But highly emotional empaths, they actually have more gray matter in the insula, which is the brain's hub for strong emotions. When you say you feel things deeply, your brain architecture literally proves it. How wild is that?
But wait, it goes even deeper. Empaths have what's called a hyperactive mirror neuron system. So mirror neurons are basically a network of brain cells responsible for echoing the behaviors and the feelings of the people around us. For empaths, this system is essentially running on overdrive. Studies suggest that when an empath sees someone in pain, whether that's a loved one, a total stranger on the street, or, even a stray animal, their brain lights up in the exact same areas associated with emotional pain. For an empath, the phrase, "I feel your pain," isn't just a figure of speech, it's a biological reality. It absolutely supercharges their compassion, but, man, it can also severely overload their sensory input.
Which brings us to Section 2, the cost of caring, empathy fatigue. Because we have to ask, what happens when this biological superpower triggers a psychological system crash? Well, when this system does crash, we see the symptoms of what researchers call empathy fatigue. Think of it as a really severe form of emotional burnout. Because an empath's brain is constantly internalizing all the stress around them without getting adequate rest, their emotional tank just runs entirely empty. And the symptoms are intense. You might feel totally numb or completely disconnected. Maybe you find yourself snapping at little things or dealing with unexplained physical issues like random headaches, stomach troubles, and just chronic heavy exhaustion. A lot of people start withdrawing from their loved ones, or they just lose motivation for daily tasks entirely. And if it's left unchecked, this fatigue can eventually lead to depression, severe anxiety, or even seeking out addictions just to numb that sensory overload. Psychiatrist Dr. Judith Orloff has this brilliant quote that truly drives the reality of this home. She says, "Empaths sense other people's emotions in our bodies without the usual filters. We can hear what they don't say." Just imagine that for a second. Walking through life with zero emotional armor. It's a beautiful gift for sure, but it leaves highly sensitive people incredibly vulnerable to the pain of the world around them. Okay, so how do we actually fix this? That leads us straight into Section 3, redefining your boundaries. Busting the wall myth. Because of how they're wired, empaths frequently become magnets for toxic people, or what some call energy vampires. And to fight back against this, we really have to unpack some deeply ingrained childhood conditioning. Let's be honest, a lot of empaths absolutely hate the word boundaries. Growing up, so many of us were taught that setting a boundary basically meant being selfish. And because of that, empaths often let people push and push and push until they finally break. And then what happens? They throw up a massive, impenetrable stone wall and shut the person out completely. That right there is the myth of boundaries. The reality is entirely different.
A boundary isn't a barrier to keep people out. A boundary is all about holding on to your personal power. It means you don't let other people dictate what you think or what you feel. You determine your own worth instead of constantly seeking outside validation. And you give yourself permission to make choices for your own well-being.
Now, holding on to your power requires a pretty massive paradigm shift. Section 4. Empathy versus compassion. The scientific shift. This is where we move away from a passive state of just feeling and adopt an active, science-backed approach. To really grasp this, we're going to look at some hard data. There was this rigorous randomized controlled study published in Frontiers in Psychology by researchers at the Karolinska Institute and the Stockholm School of Economics. Basically, they wanted to see if compassion training could actually reduce stress and mental ill health in the workplace.
The crucial takeaway here is that science makes a major distinction between empathy and compassion. Empathy involves sharing the feelings and suffering of others. It internalizes their pain, which, as we just learned, leads straight to distress and empathy fatigue. But compassion? Compassion is characterized by feelings of warmth, concern, and care, combined with an authentic desire to ease the distress. Compassion does not require you to merge with another person's pain. And because of that, compassion actually acts as a powerful buffer against stress. It literally protects your nervous system.
Which brings us to Section 5, the power of self-compassion, the ultimate buffer. Because this is where the findings from that Swedish study get truly remarkable. 6. That is the number of weeks this intervention program lasted. Just 6 weeks. It was a structured group format where employees learned to develop compassion, specifically self-compassion, and this was compared against a control group that simply did physical exercise.
The proven results from that incredibly short time frame are just striking. So while both the exercise group and the compassion training group saw decreased perceived stress and a drop in anxiety and depression, only the compassion intervention stimulated a significant growth in self-compassion. The participants learned self-kindness over self-judgment. They cultivated this loving, non-judgmental understanding of themselves. The researchers found that self-compassion is basically a highly resilient coping strategy that actually transforms heavy emotions like fear and sadness into connection and hope. Listen, if you want to survive as an empath, self-compassion is not a luxury. It is the ultimate buffer that prevents your biological empathy from totally crashing your mental health.
We've covered the science, the costs, and the ultimate buffer. So let's finish up with Section 6, protecting your energy, the actionable toolkit.
First up, you have to shift from absorbing to witnessing. Remember, you do not have to feel everything someone else feels to be supportive. You can practice what's called mindful witnessing. Just tell yourself, I can be with them in this moment without taking their pain on as mine. Their feelings are valid, but I don't have to fix them. That simple mental pivot is a game changer. It stops you from emotionally merging and draining your tank.
Next, when you do inevitably get overwhelmed, try a vagus nerve reset. Your vagus nerve regulates your parasympathetic nervous system, which is essentially your body's calm-down mechanism. If you feel that empathy fatigue creeping in, immediately reduce your external stimulation. Just get to a quiet place. Then do some structured breathing. Inhale deeply into your belly for 4 seconds and exhale slowly for 6 seconds. Finally, splash some cold water on your face. This literally tones your vagus nerve and pulls your body right out of that overloaded stress response.
And lastly, here are some non-negotiable daily habits to protect your energy. You have got to schedule intentional alone time just to center yourself. Immerse yourself in nature or take a bath. Water is actually great for clearing negative energy. If you find yourself around someone toxic, visualize an invisible protective shield right between the two of you to prevent their stress from becoming yours. Try to stop doom scrolling and consume less emotionally charged media online. And most importantly, find a friend or a therapist where you can just be without having to perform or play the strong listener.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want you to reflect on this final, somewhat provocative thought. If a true boundary isn't a giant stone wall, but is actually about holding your own personal power, who are you giving your power to today? Are you letting someone else dictate your energy, or are you ready to finally reclaim it? It's time to start practicing self-compassion and protecting that beautiful, empathic mind of yours. Thanks so much for exploring this with me today, and keep learning.